konfirmasi Kadep dulu ya. Oke, ya udah kita buka saja katanya. Oke. Pak Kasno, bisa kita mulai?
Baik, Bu. Sudah, Bu, silakan.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your attention to come to our symposium. This symposium is a mental health and disability. This was dedicated for disabled people, but also because we have a new majoring in our faculty, Faculty of Public Health, Universitas Indonesia, under a Department of Health Education and Behavior Science. We have a new majoring called Mental Health, Community Mental Health and Disability. And because the dean has another sessions that because right now we are in an Apacph conference, so she's very busy. So I think we just start our symposiums by letting Ibu Martella to lead as a moderator. Ibu Martella, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Rita. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 52nd Asia Pacific Academic Consortium for Public Health, or APAC, parallel session of the symposium. We are pleased to have you take a part in a mental health and disability session, and hope we are in a good condition. So my name is Martella, and I will be moderating this session. We already have 3 great speakers here who will share valuable insight for us. But before we begin, I have a few housekeeping notes. First, today's session is being recorded to be available for viewing post-conference, or you can watch it on the YouTube. Second, please open your camera so we can notice your pretty face actively involved in the session. And the third is, in order to be considerate and respectful to everyone attending and presenting today, all attendees are muted. So may I ask the committee to disable the participant to unmute themselves. But if you have any question regarding to the presentation, please use the chat features in the Zoom webinar, or just click the raise hand button, and then I will call your name, and then please you to talk to the speakers. And each speakers today will have around 15 minutes for their presentation. We will hold most questions until the end of the session, and I will read the question out loud for the speakers to answer as time permits. So now let's please welcome our first speaker, Prof. Hans Pols from the University of Sydney, who will present about mental health from a public health perspective. Prof. Hans, 15 minutes, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. There we go. Mental health from a public health perspective. Let me get started, since 15 minutes is not that long. Mental health became of importance to public health physicians and other public health experts when life expectancy was slowly being replaced by disability-adjusted life years. Chronic conditions receive far much more attention, which is of course important with the epidemiological transition. Mental illness has become far more important. And well, in a way, not many people die of mental illness, but have many years suffering from a very difficult chronic condition. In 2015, mental health was included in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which provide guidance to countries all over the world on how to plan for mental health care and other variables. In Indonesia, and I know this is an international conference, but more than Indonesia, but I just happen to know most about Indonesia. There's a real shortage of mental health personnel. Indonesia is not the only country where this is the case. There are 1,000 psychiatrists, 3,500 clinical psychologists, 7,000 community mental health nurses for a population of 270 million. That's not a lot. Funding for mental health care is modest. Treatment is focused on mental hospitals, which are expensive and only really good for very severe forms of mental illness. Now, interestingly, a very progressive move in Indonesia is the introduction of universal health insurance, which makes healthcare much more accessible for everybody. And it demands to have all types of care provided through primary care, through the puskesmas. That is a great idea. The question is how to do it. And there's a lot of debate about this because the doctors and the nurses at puskesmas are already very busy. Nonetheless, I think this is a very important development. Global mental health, a trend worldwide to effectuate change, is to involve lay people or health volunteers or kader in Indonesia. Since after all, the number of mental health professionals is very low, it takes a long time to educate a psychiatrist, a psychologist. So maybe in 100 years, there are enough of them, who knows? But in the meantime, we should involve lay people. In Indonesia, there's a vibrant number of support groups, people with lived experience, consumers of mental health care, like the Komunitas Peduli Schizophrenia Indonesia, Bipolar Care Indonesia, into the light. They can take up very important tasks that mental health personnel cannot, just because there's too much to do. Global mental health. Vikram Patel is one of the protagonists, and he wrote this book called Where There Is No Psychiatrist. This is a sequel of a book called Where There Is No Doctor, about global health. Because many countries, lower income countries, middle income countries, there are just not sufficient doctors. The question is how to make treatment available to all individuals who need it. In mental health is to close the mental health gap. That is the gap between the number with specific mental illnesses diagnosed versus the number of individuals who get treatment for them. That gap is quite big worldwide. But to address it when there's a shortage of mental health personnel requires creativity. And I think we should really look at how to do that. How can this be done? Involve other health professionals. Doctors are busy, get psychologists to do some work, nurses, social workers, actually teachers. Teachers are close by when kids hit adolescence, a hard time in life, and they could provide some assistance. Sometimes the police. It is very important police know what the symptoms of mental illness are, or lay people. Public health education is also very important. Now today, everybody thinks that mental health apps are great. But look, they're not bad. There are lots of apps that give you music to meditate or to fall asleep. That's great, but it doesn't really help with severe mental illness. So I think for Gojek, apps are great, and for Go Shop, I'm not sure if Go Mental Health is a goer, but something can be done in that area as well. A public health perspective on mental health would go beyond the individual and beyond thinking about how more treatment can be provided to more people. Now, the etiology of mental illness is not straightforward or simple. With TB, dengue, fever, malaria, we know the way it's transmitted and what could be done. But there are several factors known in the etiology of mental illness: poverty, inequality, war and violence, sexual abuse. And on all these levels, quite a lot can be done. In mental health, these things started to be explored after World War II in the United States. It started out by a study by Ferris and Dunham in Chicago. They looked at all the people in mental hospitals in and around Chicago and then traced the last place of residence in the city. And they found out that they live in the very poor areas where there is rapid change, low property values, lots of migrants, people with temporary jobs, no stable family life. Those are the areas with most mental illness. Then you get the question, where does it come from? Do people who are born and raised in those areas develop mental illness, or people with mental illness become poor and therefore are forced to live in those areas? The last one is the conclusion that held. A very influential study, Hollingshead and Red Lake from 58, looked at first in which socioeconomic class is most forms of serious mental illness and what kind of spending on curing or treating mental illness. The conclusions were really sobering. That is, most severe forms of mental illness are in the lowest socioeconomic section. Most money spent on treatment is by the elite, by the wealthy, to treat relatively innocent forms or everyday things like anxiety, depression. This is the mental health paradox. This is true everywhere in the world, that most money is spent on the relatively innocent conditions of well-to-do people, but the people who really need it do not get the treatment they need. This paradox is also not limited to mental health, but is pretty much about all health conditions. The firm link was established at the time and proven in a couple of other studies as well. What causes this link between poverty and mental illness? Well, poverty means lack of education. That means not being able to recognize symptoms of mental illness, but also access to medical care becomes much more difficult. To visit in Indonesia psychiatrists, psychologists in private practice, it can be done, but you got to be able to pay the fees. Also, housing, access to life's necessities is one of the basic needs, and if they're not fulfilled, then life becomes so much more difficult. Inequality, closely related to poverty. After Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher came to power in 1980, they advocated economic policies of neoliberalism, a firm belief in market forces, do away with regulation, and trickle down economics, as in let the wealthy get wealthy and they will spend the money and then that will help everybody. It's a great idea, but now we know it doesn't quite work out that way. The theme of Mental Health Day this year was mental health in an unequal world. And that is a very important theme to further explore. From 1980, inequality has increased dramatically. Currently, the world's 26th richest people own as much as the poorest 50%. I think that's abhorrent. In Indonesia, the 4 richest men own as much as the poorest 100 million. Personally, I don't mind people having some wealth, but this kind of extreme wealth is bad for everybody. Indonesia has become the 6th most unequal country in the world after the United States, Brazil, etc. That means there's a big concentration of wealth at the top and an enormous amount of poverty. Inequality affects mental health. It affects the mental health of everybody, not just the poor. There have been some great studies by Pickett and Wilkinson, the spirit level and the inner level, that demonstrate, both with economics and mental health data, that inequality, when it's increases, is really bad for the mental health of everybody. And I think it is time to take these studies very seriously, to have a look what we could do better in this world. Now, inequality in mental health data are straightforward and well established. One good thing Indonesia has done is to improve access to healthcare and mental health care through this health insurance scheme. I think further measures all over the world are needed to reduce inequality. There are so many tax advantages for wealthy people, and of course, there are many ways to avoid paying taxes. Reduce poverty, fair taxation. We know there's tax evasion by the wealthy everywhere. We just had the revelation of the Pandora Papers showing what is going on. In Indonesia, the problem is that tax revenue is not increasing, despite the fact that income levels are going up. Again, tax evasion is rampant. There's not really a political will to do something about it, but tax money is a great equalizer to spend on healthcare, education, etc. So apart from bad for mental health, this is a problem of social justice. Neoliberalism has not lived up to its promise. And I think worldwide, we need an ethical commitment to increasing equality. So no inequality on the basis of religion, or race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, income, etc. And this is why I find mental health so interesting, because it always points to issues beyond mental health. Mental illness, what makes it worse? probably any type of illness, social isolation. Stigma guarantees social isolation. Any condition gets worse. What leads to improvement? Acceptance, tolerance, and inclusion. What is needed? A sense of belonging, a sense of community. Now, sadly, worldwide, intolerance is on the rise. Economic, religious, social. Try to get to a shopping mall in Indonesia if you're poor. You simply don't get in. You get to chat to the dog. So the shopping malls in Indonesia are havens for the wealthy. Beautiful air conditioning, fantastic goods, but also a big marker of inequality. And not just Indonesia, that's worldwide. There's a war on the poor going on worldwide to outlaw begging because we don't like these beggars on the street and it deters tourists. Well, there's a reason is people are poor and maybe think about other things. Of course, many people who are caught begging are sent to panti rehabilitatie. We do not need to elaborate. They are uniformly horrible. There are a couple of nice ones, okay, but most of them are pretty bad. In Indonesia, we see effects on minority religious communities, churches being put on fire, the Ahmadiyya. We see the war on LGBT that broke out in 2018, saying that LGBT is worse than a nuclear bomb. Politicians always try to get an advantage about creating distrust and hatred. This is deeply immoral and that should be abolished. Also, these kind of pesky little things as compulsory jilbab for school students, why? This is bizarre. Now, the real enemy in Indonesia and worldwide is not so much impurity of one kind or another or lack of religious observance. It's greed. It's the immorality of the rich. And governments rely on the rich, so the willingness to do something about it is decreasing. But I hope something can be done about it. Religion based on exclusion as Muslim-only neighborhoods. Or in India, you probably have Hindu-only neighborhoods. It depends where you go. Nonetheless, if a religion is based on exclusion, I think we can firmly doubt what is motivating it. But of course, deeply and more important is exclusion as the basis on wealth. There are beautiful neighborhoods around Jakarta, and they all have fences. Once the rich are rich, they want to protect their property. Anyway, I think we really need to think about what kind of community are we? War, political violence, and terrorism. Especially when people are exposed to this early in life, terrible for mental health. There's too much of it. It's partly based on greed, the search for natural resources. Countries seem to be so easy to commit troops to fight wars. There's lots of sectarian violence, religious intolerance, etc. Sadly, the effects are long-lasting, especially if kids are exposed to it. We can do something about it. Child abuse, child sexual abuse, we now know this has long-lasting consequences, terrible for mental health. There's too much of it, but what is being done? Well, for Indonesia, I would say the anti-sexual violence bill is still being stalled in parliament. Why? This ought to be passed right away. And I will point out the Puskapa, the Center on Child Protection and Wellbeing, there's fabulous research in what homeless kids and other kids in poverty are exposed to. This is deeply worrying. And I think one role of academics would be to do this kind of research to show, look, there is a need for action. All right, mental health, what is needed? Well, I have a very long wish list, and I wish it could all easily be realized. Well, let's say we need an inclusive society, tolerance, inclusion, acceptance. Indonesia has such a long tradition of inclusion and acceptance, which I think is just really wonderful. But there are some counter trends going on in the last 10, 20 years, and I think we should do something about it. No more war on LGBT, maybe a war on greed. Okay, no more war on the poor and stigma. Decrease inequality, increase equality, social justice, a meaningful life for everybody, and a sense of community. Now that wish list, I know it's very big, but let's stay idealistic. Mental health is always about issues beyond mental health. It's about society as a whole and what society we wish to live in. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Hans, for the excellent, indeed, compact presentation. We got so many new insight here. And for the attendees, I would like to remind you, if you want to ask the question, please click raise hand button and wait until I call you to ask the question in the end of the presentation. And please identify yourself, name and institution, and then the presenter to whom you would like to ask the question. You can also put the question in the chat box. Okay, so let's continue to our second speaker, Muhammad Joni Yulianto, SPDMA, Board of Sasana Inklusi dan Gerakan Advokasi Difabel or SIGAP Indonesia, who will present about Between Hopes and Reality, learning from advocacy experience on disability rights and inclusion of SIGAP Indonesia. Mr. Joni, time is yours.
Thank you very much, Martela, for time given. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start my presentation, which is actually based on the experience of SIGAP. SIGAP or Sasana Inklusi dan Gerakan Advokasi Difabel or Institute for Inclusion and Advocacy of Persons with Disabilities is a disability organization based in Yogyakarta that was established in 2004. So this presentation is basically based on what we have learned while we are working on the disability rights advocacy. I'm given this title, but then I try to make the substance of the presentation in a more optimistic way to encourage us more having courage during this afternoon time, waktu Indonesia Barat, yeah. So in other time zone might be different. Yeah. Right. So just the background is that as some of you already know, that in Indonesia, the progress of disability rights policies during this last 10 years or 5 years particularly has been very rapid progression. We have the new disability law followed by a lot of implementing regulation. But the key is then that this set of policies and regulations need to also be brought into the shift of paradigm, shift of practices in terms of how we respond to the fact of disability, not only on the paper, but also on the real action. So this is just to give you a snapshot of the disability profile in Indonesia. So 8.26% of the total population is person with disabilities. This is based on the survey of social and economy in 2020. I'm not going to go into detail of these numbers. So let's just right, but then the fact is that we need to look at not only the disability data itself, but also the fact in terms of the enjoyment of the rights. In the sector of education, for example, nowadays we still find that less than 10% from total of this disability population who enroll in the education. So very big gap if we compare of person with disabilities and those without disabilities in terms of enjoyment of their rights. And as we recognize the fact that Indonesia have a lot of archipelagos, villages, remote areas with limited access to infrastructure, this also becomes another barriers to inclusion and access when we talk about disabilities, because most of developments are happening in the rural, in the urban area, and not so much are progressing. But now we have a lot of potential in terms of building villages, because we have the new law on village and also regulation, and significant budget are provided into the village. So in the current situation, we need also to look at the real situation on how COVID-19 have been impacting person with disabilities. We did a survey in 2020 with 1693 participants, respondent from 32 provinces. And we are also currently doing another of survey, which the report will be coming soon. But the numbers that I presented now is taken from the 2020 survey. So based on the survey, COVID-19 have been impacting significantly to the personal and social activity of persons with disabilities. A lot of activity and services to health, for example, are closed and not become fully accessible to persons with disabilities. Activities are not fully independent. A lot of difficulties in getting access to personal assistant, for example, which resulted being very limited in terms of independent activities for those with particularly mobility disability. Education has been also very significantly impacting online platform, which become the most used platform for education, has very slowly addressing the accessibility issue for persons with disabilities, and in particular also a lot of issues with the learning method for certain type of disabilities. The difficulty become very significant, because not in most of online method, it is difficult to bring the concrete experience which is needed by, for example, those with learning disabilities. Assistive device is also one of the common issues for those with visual impairment. Sign language interpretation is also a big issues in special schools or schools that implement online learning platform. Economic impact has been the one that is strongly influenced by the COVID-19, because as you know that most of persons with disabilities in Indonesia who are in the productive age are mostly working in informal sector, and as our survey found it, that around 50 to 80% has decreased their income, and most of them who are impacted are those who are working in informal sector. So after looking at the figure from the situation based on the COVID-19, what we realized is that COVID-19 has resulted the more person with disabilities into the more vulnerable situation. but also a lot of remaining challenges that not only because of the COVID-19. We also have still a lot of challenge with policy understanding and interpretation. We know that our policy have been significantly improving, but it's not that easy to make all the duty bearers implement as what the policy has stated. And also the challenge of the social value, social norm is also significant. So talking about disability rights and inclusion, we cannot rely only to the existing regulation. So what we are trying to do in SIGAP is try to begin with a local solution. What is that about? We will talk later. But with the local solution, we hope to bring change into the bigger arena. We use twin track approach of disability, which is one is the disability specific initiative, but then the second, we need to bring the issue into the mainstream. So what we mean by inclusion is that we translated inclusion as the value of our own. So talking about inclusion is not about the value from others, but rather this is something that's already existing in our culture. Bhinneka Tunggal Ika is the philosophy of our country, our state, which means diversity, unity in diversity. So inclusion is basically celebrating differences that we need to introduce in our community throughout whatever we are working. So we start implementing inclusion from the village that we mentioned as Desa Inklusi. So why we start from village? Because we believe that village is the area where most of people with disability are living, and that are the area where actually discrimination are a lot of happening, but then very little recognition or even solution. So we start this initiative basically in 2014 and still progressing until now. I will just skip some of this picture. I know the time is running. So as you see, this is the crowd event that we organize once in 2 years. This is the Temu Inklusi. So Temu Inklusi is like a conference, biennial conference that bring together disability activists, government, NGOs, private sector to discuss the challenge of inclusion and how we are going to face the challenge to improve inclusion in Indonesia. So based on the Temu Inklusi 2014, we then try to finalize the concept of Desa Inklusi or inclusive villages and try to implement from 8 villages and now have been adopted by so many villages by other organizations too. First, about inclusive village that we try to adopt and implement is the inclusive village needs to be asset based. So the asset needs to come from villages that we're working with. That's why lack of resources is always answered by identifying what is existing and what can we use to improve inclusion in the area. So the second is building knowledge through experience. So we believe that we cannot just tell people that you need to do this and this, but you need to start with your own experience of what is the problem, what is the challenge, and how we find the solution together. And then the next is to improve the system. They need to be connected with other resources, with other people that bring knowledge, so that they can improve solution, how they cope with the problem. So in the villages, we work with disability activists. We work with activists who are working for governance issues and other matter as well. The important part of this inclusive village initiative is to bring this initiative as their own initiative. So we realize that as an organization from outside the villages, we are outsider. So we bring idea for change, but we want this idea to be their own. So we don't want this to be our ideas. We want this to be their own, and they need to be proud of whatever changes, whatever progresses that are happening in their own villages. We also need to recognize the champion, the local figure, because they are the one who is going to be making sure that this initiative is going to be continuing. Local people needs to be the leader of this initiative. The next part, which for us is very crucial, is to bring person with disabilities as the local actors. So inclusion is not just bringing people in, but bringing people to be empowered as a leader for their own. That is what we learned from this initiative. So we develop organization of persons with disabilities in the village. We also advocate for them to get recognition from the village, and then they can identify, and then whatever they need, and they can discuss with the village mechanism in terms of how village need to allocate some budget allocation and program allocation for their needs and interests. And this has resulted a lot of empowerment in different sectors, in economic sector, livelihood, and also some progress in education. Community awareness building is another important component. We know that stigma has been very strong in the less educated people. So building awareness and understanding on what is disability, what is inclusion, very basic knowledge is very important. And the effective way is to bring person with disabilities themselves into the process of the capacity building and knowledge development of this. And the other is, of course, to assist villages to develop their own organizational and capacity, for example, in developing programs, in how they can be accountable and responsible to the budget they are using, how they develop programs that are participatory for our villagers. So from this initiative, this is the learning point that we found. So we believe that inclusion needs to be foundation, whatever the issues that you are working. in our case, disability, but also bring inclusion into the our own philosophy is the way that are more acceptable for the people. Also, the second is that inclusion is not an instant process. It takes a long time to introduce from the very earlier process, and also need to be continually reviewed, implemented, and improved. And the third is that to work on inclusion, we need to do it comprehensively, not only working in the services, but also we need to really hear what they want, hear what is their aspiration, and then work together and then learn from whatever mistake that happened during the process. So that is the end of my presentation, and thank you very much, and looking forward in the discussion. Back to you, Mbak Martela.
Martela, where are you?
She's already out. Maybe connection problem.
Connection problem?
Connection problem. Oh, itu. Yeah, here you are again.
Hello, sorry, because I just get the loss for the internet connection. Yeah, this is happening not only for the rain season, I think. Okay, thank you, Mas Joni, for the presentation. And before I continue to the third speaker, I would like to please Pak Dian Ayubi for introducing all of us about the major in your university, Pak.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Martela. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to meet you. And my name is Dian Ayubi. I am head of education and behavior science department, Faculty of Public Health University Indonesia. I would like to appreciate for our distinguished speaker, Prof. Hans Pols, Pak Joni, and Ibu Rita, and our excellent moderator, Bu Ms. Martela. In our study program Magister of Public Health, we already have major of community mental health and disability. Now we have 2 batches, and some of them attend this symposium. Yeah, I see some of them attend this symposium, and we offer the program is learning by doing, because our staff is also need to improve our knowledge, our experience in this session. Or so we have very happy we have the opportunity to conduct this symposium, and I would like I hope we will have collaboration in the future with Hans Pols and Pak John and Bu Martela to develop this our major. Thank you very much for this opportunity. we hope we can take many beneficence from these symposiums. And also thank you for the participants to be here. Nice to you. Nice meet to you. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Diano Yubi, for introducing the majors in the University of Indonesia. So now I'm going to continue to the third speaker. Our third speaker is Dr. Andarita Damayanti, MSPH, Department of Health Education and Behavioral Science, University of Indonesia, who will present about designing inclusive learning in higher education, University of Indonesia's experience. Mrs. Rita, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Martella. So let me share my slides. Sorry. So can you see my slides?
Okay. Yes, clearly.
So in my sessions, I will share about designing inclusive learning in higher education. So this is our experience in University of Indonesia. But before we talk about that, so we should know about what is disability. Pak Johnny already mentions, he already have a lot of experience in advocacy. So from the WHO, disability mentioned that is any conditions of the body or mind that makes it more difficult for the person with conditions to do certain activities and interact with the worlds around them. So from these definitions, there's three terms, that's very important. First is impairment, because the functions, the lack of functions, impairment. And then because of that, there's a lack of ability limitations or disability. And then the last part is the important things is participant restrictions, or we call it handicap. So that's the things that Johnny advocates. So we cannot let the disabled persons have many restrictions. Talking about disability, we already have five perspectives on disability. The first one is charity models. In charity models, we focus on individuals and tends to view people with disability as a passive victim. So we must help them. The second one, medical models that focus on the impairment that disability needs to be fixed or cured. The third one is a social model. So this is rather different between the first and the second. In the third models, it's focused on the attitude, environment, and institutional barriers. Human rights models focus on the transmissions of the unjust systems and practice. And the last one, interactions model that focus on the negative interactions between health conditions and context. It means a physical and social environment, and also personal factors. This that Prof. Hans talking about the stigma. I got this from the Krippen. So this is kind of like the examples of medical models. Talking about disability, because there's many restrictions for them, so we should have a concept about inclusions. So what is disability inclusions? Empowering disabled people to fully participate in the program and self-advocates in the development process and emergency response to reduce barriers. Pak Johnny already have a lot of experience in this disability inclusions. With its disability inclusion, with the inclusions, the disabled peoples being accepted and recognized in the community, having personal relationship and support, being involved in the recreation and other social activities, and the last one that very, very important, having employment or appropriate living accommodations. What is the barriers for disability inclusions? There's 4 barriers. First one is attitudinal barriers. Yeah, we also sometimes we call it a stigma and discriminations. And then there's internalized barriers. Yeah, if we talk about internalized barriers, usually because there's a low self-esteem. Yeah, sometimes this is due to the child rearing patterns. Yeah, when the parents did not push the disabled child to do what they can do. Yeah, so sometimes there's a low self-esteem. And then the third barriers is environmental barriers. This is because lack of disabled-friendly regulations. Human rights working with this, human rights models, and institutional barriers, inadequate data and cost concern, because they always think if we make kind of like a lift, for the disabled person, so it's take a lot of cost, So this is the others caricature from the Krippen, Just make a don't make a stairs, it's make easier for people with using a wheelchair to just go to another part of the place. What make us concerned about disability? Because there's poverty also, embedded with this disability. This is the analysis, situation analysis from the World Bank Group. 50% of the world populations experience some of disability, but 80% of disabled people live in developing country. So what is their conditions? 1/3 of the 58 million children out of schools have disability. So lack of educations. And then employment rate for disabled, 50 to 75% lower than others. But the good one is, the good news is 174 countries have ratified the unconventions on the right of person with disability, and also in Indonesia. Pak Johnny already mentions about the situations in Indonesia. It's around 12.15%. It's the estimations disability in Indonesia. But the less than 45% have less educations than elementary. So they never go to schools or never finish elementary schools. What is the impact on disability inclusion? Inclusion is very important, talking about disability. Because with inclusions, we can increase earning and labor productivity, improve individuals and family well-being, and develop a wider inclusive and accessibility society. So that's why we must have an inclusion policy. In education, since we know that the disabled people's lack of education strategy for students with disability, we have 3 types, special educations. The second one, special education integrations program. And the third one, this is the best one, inclusive educations program. Special educations schools, we already have it in Indonesia for a very long time ago, But inclusive educations, we are going to do this, But we need more expert teachers. to have a good employment career, yeah, the disabled peoples must be supported to have a higher educations. Yeah, so there's a lot of studies, yeah, or learning about how make the students with disability a success in higher educations. Yeah, and also we already knows there's a lot of organizations that working with this, yes, such as AHEAD, Associations on Higher Education and Disability. Yeah, it's already established in 1977. Yeah, and then already have 4,000 members representing 50 states and 10 countries. Yeah. Also, we have a kind of like access team practice, yeah, funded by National Science Foundations. And they supported students from science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Yeah, it's already began from 2002. Yeah, they want make the students, yeah, have belonging, self-determinations, and purpose, and involve them in many activities. Our experience, yeah, UE experience is working with the consortiums of Edu for All. Yeah, the consortiums consists of 3 parts. Yeah, from Europe. Yeah, there's a University of Alicante, Glasgow Caledonian University, and then University of Piraeus Research Centers. Yeah, and Indonesia there's a 6 university. Ya, Universitas Islam Negeri Sunan Kalijaga, Universitas Indonesia Lambung Mangkurat, Universitas Negeri Surabaya, Institut Agama Islam Surakarta, and Universitas Islam Negeri Syarif Hidayatullah. Yeah, and the NGOs working with these consortiums is SIGAP, so it's much journey involved in this consortium. What is the goal of these consortiums? Ensuring access and quality education for students with disability in Indonesian university. Yeah. How about in UE? Yeah, we already have a decree for the teams, yeah, to work with disability. Yeah, but since UE is a big, have a big bureaucracy, yeah, the unit where the service will stay there, yeah. So it's haven't been decided yet, yeah. So there's two boards, yeah, 2 teams, yeah, advisory board. Advisory board consists of the rectors, vice rectors, and then team in charge, directorates, yeah, and then coordinators, student affair unit, and then steering committee. So that's a professor. But for the organizing teams, yeah, under steering committee, there's a team leader, secretary, and then research and training, and then assistive device and facility, and the last one is a support service. So the main task of this team is in research and training, making awareness training, yeah, that we already make it for kind of like 2 years in a row, capacity building training, mentoring and supporting, workshop on disability in high schools, yeah, so supported them to go to the higher educations, and then assessment training, yeah. For the assistive device and facility, we already have a system for the blind, deaf, yeah, and for mobility, colorblind, yeah. So this is can improving the laboratory facilities and capacities also. For support service, we will have a volunteers recruitment for the students and lecturers, coordinating the faculties, supporting the establishment of faculty system, and promoting the service, and then also the assessment. So this is the workflow. Step 1, gathering data, yeah, data for analysis, and then capacity building for the unit of faculties and volunteers, and then providing a service. The current situations on student with disability is first, yeah, gather data. Yeah, so in right now, yeah, 2021, yeah, we have 50 students, yeah, that declare as disabled, but 34 of them, yeah, hasn't diagnosed yet. Yeah, only 16. And this is the survey online, yeah, when the new students come, so they fill in with the Google form, yeah. The students right now, yeah, in 2021, 7,148 bachelor, yeah. And this is the type of disability: blind color, yeah. The many one is others, yeah, because of this unseen disability, and then a no response. So they still don't want to mention what kind of disability. But we have low vision for students, deaf to students, learning difficulties one student, and mental health, yeah, as and mobility problems too. From years to years, we know that students with mental health problems is rather a lot, yeah, compared to others, because we don't have any affirmative, yeah, for the disability, yeah. Still, we don't have a affirmative opportunity. When they come to as a new students, yeah, they will fill the forms. Are you disabled? Yes or no? Or not diagnosed, what kind of disability, and do you need help, and what kind of help? Yeah, that's the simple question for them. And from the data sharing, yeah, we will interact within health clinics, yeah, registrations directorates, and then go to the service unit for the student with disability. And also we will go to the faculties, yeah, every faculties in the student affairs, yeah, and the vice dean and dean will manage, yeah, because the service is also should be in under faculties. As Pak Dian already mentioned, yeah, we have a community mental health and disability in our faculty of public health. Yeah, let's join it if you interested. We already have 12 students, yeah, in 2 years in a row. And we also have the, the 6th university, and then also others university already included. We call it Kopertina, Consortium Perguruan Tinggi Inklusif in Indonesia. This is the link, yeah. And this is the last one. Yeah, so no one left behind. That's the motto of our service. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Rita, for the excellent presentation. And I would like to remind to all the participants again, if you would like to ask the question, please click raise hand button and wait until I call you to ask the question. And please identify yourself, name and institution, and the speakers to whom you would like to ask the question. You can also put your question in the chat box, rather in the chat or in the Q&A box. So I got one question here in the chat box, and also one question that coming from Mrs. Yeni Rosa that used the raise hand button. And let me allow Mrs. Yeni Rosa to talk. Yeah, please Mrs. Yeni Rosa.
Yes, can you hear my voice? Hello.
Yes, clearly.
All right, thank you. Yeah, my name is Jenny Rosa Damayanti. I'm chair of Indonesian Mental Health Association. I would like to address my question to Ms. Rita Damayanti. I'm interested in one of the point in your presentation that explain about the differences between charity model, medical model, and social model. One of the things you mentioned is that on the medical models of disability, the biggest concern of us in the psychosocial disabilities groups or groups of person with mental health problems or psychosocial disability problems is that people still, most of the time, the approach towards us is still in the medical model. Even though for other type of disabilities, for example, like the sensory disabilities or physical disabilities, they already move forward from medical model to more social models and human rights model. But for a person with psychosocial disabilities, the approach is stuck in the medical models. So when people talk about person with mental disabilities or psychosocial disabilities, people only talk about, about the treatment gap, about the medication, about the availability of psychiatrists and medication and stuff like that. It seems like the only problem is only medical treatment for us. It seems like when this problem solved, then the problem of person with psychosocial disabilities are solved. And that's quite worrying because we have many, the things that we need is far beyond just the fulfillment of our medication. Because even though we already have medication, after that, then what? We still need works, we still need income, we still need social protection, we still need education, etc., etc. So if efforts is only focused on closing the treatment gap, on to make a medication available, that's far from enough for us. So this is one of the biggest problem that person with psychosocial disability are stuck within the medical models. That's the first one that I would like to comment and ask also the response from Ms. Damayanti. Another one is that, yeah, I agree that, when I check disability service unit in many universities abroad, most of the users of the facilities, the disability service centers, many of them are persons with psychosocial disabilities. That's so true. I myself, for example, several times accompanied student with psychosocial disabilities from University of Indonesia when they are, in risk of being terminated from the universities because they already overused the limit of 6 years of study period for University of Indonesia. So mostly 6 years is the most, and after, if you do not finish your studies within 6 years, then you've been kicked out of the school, of the universities. The problem with students with psychosocial disability, with mental health problems, is that many of them only find out that they got these mental health problems after, spending years or spending quite a long time in trying to find out what's wrong with them and trying to find out the right treatment for them. And when they already started to get better, then their study period is over. So many of the students with psychosocial disabilities actually being dropped out of universities, including from University of Indonesia. I know some of my friends who's been dropped out of University of Indonesia and Institute Pertanian Bogor and also several other universities because of this problem. So one of the things that very important for students with psychosocial disabilities is the flexibility of study period, which means that if they have to spend, say, like 1 semester being treated, in hospitals or in other facilities, they should it should not be counted as, absent from study. And the limit of 6 years hopefully is not applied to them, because sometimes they spend 2 years in hospital. No, not really in hospitals, but to find the right medication for them. So I think that's one of the reasonable accommodation that really needed, because based on my organization observation, more than half of students with psychosocial disabilities in higher education everywhere drop out of universities because there's no support and lack of reasonable accommodation, including on the study period. So I would like also to ask the response of Ms. Damayanti concerning this problem. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Yeni Rosa Damayanti. It's quite interesting. You have the same last name, Damayanti. So please, I give floors for Mrs. Rita Damayanti to answer the question from Mrs. Yeni.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Yeni, for your questions. The first question is about medical models, and I agree with you that usually people focus on the medicines, yeah, but some of the mental health problems need it. So that's why we want to make sure also that they can access with the medicines, but it's not enough. You are very right, yeah. So it's not enough. It's not only about the medicines, but also the social interactions and then the involvement. Yeah, I think Pa Hans, yeah, can also talk about this, because he's talking about the mental health, yeah, and for the experience, yeah, with the one that you said, that it's really true, because it happens also with my students, yeah. So one of my students cannot, although I already fight for it, yeah, UI, it's a giant elephant. There's a lot of bureaucracy, so although we fight, the dean fight, yeah, but there's also one things that cannot accept it, yeah. But we need advocacy. Maybe we should call Pak Joni, yeah, to fight for it, yeah, or Ibu Yeni Rosa, yeah. But why we failed at that time, yeah, because the students cannot show it that he was diagnosed, yeah. So I already asked them to go to the badan counseling mahasiswa, yeah, but he didn't do that, So I cannot because one thing is, if the disabled students will get help, yeah, or they should diagnosed. So I think also in Athena, yeah, it's also like that. So if the disabled wants to get kind of like funding, well, not funding, what is supported fund, yeah, they should be diagnosed. It's not nice, yeah, but I mean, it's a bureaucracy, yeah. But the other one, the one that still working with me right now, yeah, he can do that because he's have a psychiatrist, yeah, and things like that. The sad thing says that his mother died because of COVID. I'm kind of like worried, yeah, because he has a lot of pressures, yeah, but I think he can handle it very well, yeah, and I hope he will succeed in this semester. Yeah, so Mbak Yeni, so I did not want to defend myself, yeah, it still happened, yeah, and I hope that with the majoring, yeah, this majoring under Padian Ayubi, we can give more attention to the students with mental health problems. I know it's more than disabled, students. I hope my answers satisfied you. But I want Pak Hanspo to comment also to Ibu Yeni.
Okay, please, Mr. Hans Pauls to respond to the question from Mrs. Yeni Rosa.
Hello, Jenny. I think you make a fabulous point. Of course, this is important. And, we know Indonesia is very famous for its bureaucracy. Not necessarily bad. There needs to be a process in place at UI, at every university. We have developed this at the University of Sydney over the past few years, only quite recently, that there's a disability office and the people can just come with their documentation. They don't need to share it with anyone else. And on that basis, decisions are being made of extensions of study periods or adjustments in exams. Look, it's a big job because the student submits documentation, decision is being made, then it's forwarded to all the people that take courses with. It can be done. It's a big job. I think it is very important it's being done because it's all about inclusion. And all the research I've seen in Indonesia says people with disabilities on an individual level, school teachers will do everything to include them. Fantastic. Now we need to go a step further and make the institutions inclusive. It's a much bigger job. And it starts with ramps for people in wheelchairs. That's relatively straightforward. Mental disabilities, people are still very uneasy about it, but it can be done. So I think, yes, we need to keep advocating. And that's not easy. And it's true, as Rita said, universities are elephants. They're very, very, very big elephants. And you write a position paper and it's being discussed in the faculty here, or the faculty doesn't know about. Then it goes to the university senate. Then they will start an advisory committee. So it could take a couple of years, but I think we got to start somewhere. And I think there are a couple of people, some of them in this panel, who are aware of these issues within the university. And let's get to work. Jenny, would you like me to elaborate on anything else or anyone else in the panel?
Yeah. Mrs. Yeni, do you want to respond or we can continue to the next question?
Thank you for the responses. And I'm truly glad that this issue is taken seriously. Hopefully in the future, things will get better for us persons with psychosocial disability. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Yeni, and also Mrs. Rita and Mr. Hans for responding the question. So I got one question here on the chat box. I will read it because unfortunately we didn't provide the sign language interpreter here. And this question comes from one of my friend, Surya Sahetapi. So I will read the question. Hello, my name is Surya. I am from Hyundai Tuli and also a master student for deaf education at RIT New York. I learned based on the PPT. Hope you can enable live transcription as soon as possible. So I would like to share that deaf students' mental health support are mostly depending on the sign language access. As far as I know that University of Indonesia, especially faculty FIB, has been provided sign language class since 2009. So I am wondering about your view about how to improve the mental health service in campus area, especially supporting deaf students and students with various disability. For example, faculty or counseling service are exposed with the basic of Indonesian Sign Language and disability awareness already. And what the strategies will you use to raise this awareness for the near of the future? Thank you. Maybe I will give the floor for Mrs. Rita first, and then if Mr. Hans or Mas Joni want to add some insight, I will please you.
Yeah. Okay. In our university, we don't have any faculty that work for the special students, such as like in other university, yeah, like in Brawijaya, yeah. But luckily, we have a laboratory language under sastra itu apa? Martella, sastra, Fakultas Sastra. So it's under what you call it in English? Sastra.
Humanity?
Yeah, humanity. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, under Faculty of Humanity, there's a laboratory language, yeah, for sign language. Yeah, that's the one that maybe you mentioned, yeah. And the one that show it in the video is one of the deaf students. Yeah, he works in the lab, yeah, also, but he also studied in Bahasa. We are still discussing about students with deaf students, yeah, because if the teachers, I mean the sign language, yeah, he is from another expert, yeah. So if he just helping the students, yeah, in medical schools, yeah, but he have no medical background, sometimes it's rather difficult also. So luckily Dimas, he is the Adi is under the humanity, and then their friends in sign language lab, yeah, also in humanity. So it's not difficult, but this the ones that we discuss it, yeah. And they also always make a kind of like a training, yeah, for anybody, yeah. And then we are going to recruit the students also to have the sign language training, yeah, and then can help the students, yeah, the deaf students, yeah. So but it's still a long way, Pak Jo. So it's still a long way to go, yeah. And I also learned when I was in Athena, yeah. When I asked about interpreters, yeah, he said that he has no sign language interpreters, so he must ask from the social service department, yeah. And although it's under the government, but it's a cost, right? So so that's the experience in another country also, yeah. But we are yeah, you know, we will do the best that we can, yeah, under the very a lot of limitations, yeah. But I understand the needs, yeah, because when I talk about learning from the lips, yeah, it's not easy, for the deaf people, yeah. So it's easier if we have sign language. But this is for the sign language interpreters is already kind of like in I'm Catholics, and in a mass, yeah, it's always there's a sign language interpreter, yeah. So it's already like that, yeah. But right now, so I'm terribly sorry that we have no sign language interpreters.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Rita. Anything to add for Mr. Hans and Mr. Johnny?
Zoom allows live transcription. I'm not sure how to turn it on. It's not perfect, but it's a good start. I think that's really easy. To get interpreters is a bit harder. Mm-hmm. And but we need to think about this, right?
Okay, yeah, I already forward the way to activate the closed caption in the Zoom meeting to Pak Kasno, but I don't know, maybe because we already running the session, maybe it's not available to put the live captioning here.
Yeah, we need to set it up ahead of time.
Yeah, Yeah. So maybe for the next webinar, and we are hopefully for all of the conference and webinars are accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. Mas Joni, you want to add something from Surya's question?
Maybe just a little bit from my experience when I started to work with Universitas Islam Negeri, the Islamic State University in Jogja. So starting in 2007, I guess, in Jogja, we started to discuss about disability studies and services at the State Islamic University in Jogja. And the history was actually because the university was recognized as one university that accept a blind student. But then they recognize that they want to be inclusive, not only for blind students, but for everyone, for different type of disabilities too. But then there is lack of resources that they have. So they started with organizing the disabled student in the university. And that is the way they started to be recognized as a university that are inclusive. And also they started to kind of better recognize the need of different type of disability in terms of learning access, in terms of mobility access, and different type of barriers that need to be addressed. And that was really helpful in terms of raising awareness of not just the lecturer, but also the management in the university. So I think that could be one thing to start or to continue with, because I believe University of Indonesia have been starting also in doing that. So this event like this, making sure accessibility could be one thing that not just kind of improving the branding of inclusion, but also improving awareness of people who are working with us, that accessibility is kind of priority that need to be always made sure in any public event that we are having. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mas Joni, and I agree with you. Rather than just provide some infrastructure that accessible for persons with disabilities, the most important thing is awareness from the society and also from the student at the university. So if the infrastructure is not kind of ideal, I think if the students are really aware about the disability, they can help each other to make more convenient for the learning process in the university. Okay, and I will read one question from Prasita Ayu Widyaning Tias, University of Indonesia. The question is for Mas Joni. How does SIGAP increase awareness from the government about disability so that the political will of the government to solve the problems about accessibility and realizing accessibility policies can be applied, such as the example in Yogyakarta? Please, Mas Joni.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the way we increase awareness of the government is by facilitating government and people with disabilities or the community to work together, to interact. And that is a lot easier in the village level. and then in the sub-district level, because they are very close to the community, and usually not just close in terms of the that they stay on the same village, for example, but also sometimes there is some emotional attachment that we can use to make them to be able to better interact or working together. So from that real interaction, real experience, they have different understanding and opinion about disability, and also bring some kind of role model, person with disabilities who have different background, different experience, and they can do more with the better experience they have. That quite open the eyes of government people, but that might not be always the case. So it cannot be like general tips that can be used, but we start from that way, and then improve the relationship, and then start doing things more strategically, planning things together like that. So yeah, that's simple.
Okay, I will put some question to add what is the previously question from Mrs. Prasita. How if we know that the bureaucracy is kind of have a high turnover? For example, that the previous leader in Yogyakarta are really aware about the disability awareness and also the community, but turns out that he changed. And then you have to advocate from the beginning. So how or what is the strategy from SIGAP regarding to the high turnover in the bureaucracy?
That's really the case. So that is always the case actually, when we have already known people that we feel, okay, this is the one we work with, and then he or she is replaced by others, and then we have to start from the beginning. But that's why it is important to have actor that is really in the community, because we are an NGO. We are, for example, when we work in the village, we have outsider. We are outsider, so we need to make sure that there is someone who are in the village, and he or she is the actor or champion for the movement. So that is always something that we try to do. Even when we work with the government, we always want to have not just one person that become our contact person, but also there is someone who can become a backup for that needs. So if for example, someone is replaced by other who is new to the issue, we still have other person that can become our contact, but also continue to support the initiative going forward. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mas Juni, for the response. And I would like to personally ask the question to Prof. Hans Pols. It's about if we talk about the mental health in the pandemic era. For example, like now people who are studying at school or working at office, they choose to work from home. but we know that work from home is like working full hours for us. So the issues of mental health is quite increasing right now, because not only I mean, like, particularly talk about the friends with disability, but all of the people here in all over the world experience the same thing. How do you see that, or maybe you have the same the best practice from your country that really help, or that really consider the mental health issues regarding in the pandemic era? And we all know that everything should be digital, everything should be on the laptop, on the screen, and we sometimes or many times feel overwhelmed about the work and the study. How do you see this this kind of event, and how, or what is the strategy that applied by your country to make the mental health is more is better for everyone?
Well, the pandemic, of course, made us all realize we need a sense of community. And being at home, yeah, especially for younger people, right? They just have to be with their friends all the time, and this became very difficult. Secondly, working from home is easier if you have a big home with a great internet connection. And so many people in Indonesia and everywhere else, they cannot afford a laptop. There's no internet in the neighborhood. The parents have to go work. So if you are at home, big home, great job, you can work from home, you call Gojek and you get your food delivered. If you work for Gojek, you just got to go to work, expose yourself potentially to COVID. So again, the effects of COVID in health and also mental health have been unequally distributed. Wealthier people, yeah, their job kept paying their income, the food was delivered, they didn't have to leave the house, they could cope. For so many other people, it caused a lot of additional problems. So basically, it exacerbated existing issues. What are best practices in Australia? Well, they say they will invest a lot more in mental health. That's not bad. That's quite good, of course, but there's so much more needed than that. And mental health is everybody's business. We cannot just leave it to a couple of professionals, even though having mental health professionals is a good thing. Access to mental health care, very important. So that's not quite a coherent answer, but these are some thoughts about these issues.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have one question here from Mr. Abdul Mahfuz Zulfikar Putra Hamid from the University of Indonesia. The question is for Pak Joni. As your perspective, how to make inclusive education in Indonesia better? Because as I heard from one of the lecturers once said that by involving social workers like in Europe, is it true that involving social workers could help to develop inclusive education? Please answer, Pak Joni.
Thank you. I'll try my best.
Yes.
To me, I think inclusive education, it is true that implementation of inclusive education need the involvement of multidiscipline, not just social worker, but also those who are expert in technology, many different disciplines. So social work, I think not the only one. The second is that what I follow in Indonesia, the debate of inclusive education, is that people are imagining inclusive education as what is ideal of inclusive education. So they already imagine that when we do inclusive education, the infrastructure need to be fully accessible. All the things need to be all in place. And that is difficult. not even, I think, developed country who start with that situation, all start with learning with something that is not in place in their institution. So it's about improvement and agreement to do the process, do the improvement together. A lot of discussion on inclusive education. People are doubt that this is the best we do, because they think all the requirement would need to be developed first, and no action to develop the requirement. For example, we know that we need to have expert, but none of the training that are improving the number of expert teacher, for example. So we keep on working on discourses, but no start. So I think the best way is to start, then learn what is the mistake and improve the mistake. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the great answer. I hope it will answer the question from the Mr. Abdul. And before, so I just look at the time, and then we already running the time because this is so interesting topic. But before I close this interesting session and really fruitful session, I would like to give the time for each of panelists to give some maybe like closing statement or message for more inclusive Indonesia. Please, first is for Mr. Hans Pols.
Closing message. Look, the fact that we are talking about this, the fact there's awareness, is a fantastic first step. And I think we know what needs to happen, but not everybody does, right? So, but there is a start. To do this well, and to do it for all different disabilities that are around, is a very big job. Nonetheless, I think we can stay optimistic when we see slow incremental progress. We cannot do it all at once, but there are sufficient people who are aware of this, who know what needs to be done, who are trying to do things. And I think that is a reason to be very optimistic. And of course, we will all be disappointed because it's going too slow. And it is difficult. And governments and whoever, universities, are not always showing the commitment they should. Yeah, it's a long way, but nobody said it would be easy. But we're in it together.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I agree with you. So appreciate the small process. And next for Mrs. Rita, please, if you have some closing statement or message for more inclusive Indonesia.
So for me as lecturers in University of Indonesia, I understand that it's a long way to go to give a good service to the students with disability in our university. But yeah, so like me, I'm only a lecturer in the Faculty of Public Health. I'm not a decision maker. But I hope that with we have majoring in mental health and disability, we hope that our efforts, our discussions, our seminars, will make the decision makers in Universitas of Indonesia, make it more faster. I understand that every faculties give their service to the students with disability, but actually we need one in the rectorates, that can, can link it, so it can become a more efficient if we work like that. Yeah, that's my hope. And although it's already beginning with Edu for All, but we still need, we still need to work, to make it happens in the system. Right now, it's kind of like our concern, but it's already in the system. So I think we can serve better to the students, disability students in our university.
Yeah, thank you. So the initiative is good, but the next homework may be to make sure the commitment from the leaders in the university to apply all of the things that accessible for all students. And we are hoping that many universities join the Edu for All or Copertina, right, Mrs. Rita? So all of the university in Indonesia can be more inclusive. So the last but not least, please for Mas Joni to give some message for more inclusive Indonesia.
Yeah. I think Copertina is an example of great exchange and collaboration, and that is what we need for inclusion. So even if we talk about inclusion in our institution, we really need other knowledge, we really need other sources, other experience that we can easily find from the network that we have. So being inclusive means also being open for collaboration, open for working together, which will make our work a lot of easier. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Joni. Okay, so I should close this interesting session. I would like to say thank you to all our great speakers today, and thank you for attending this session to all the attendees. And be sure to visit the main hall or the other next symposium parallel sessions. My name is Martella, and see you on another occasion, and enjoy the rest of APEC event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
You.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Sampai jumpa lagi.
Sampai jumpa, Pak Paul.